So hello and welcome to Sustaining Your Home with Galusha Solar. I'm Jackie Meyer, co-owner of Galusha Solar here in Aurora, Colorado. Being in the solar business, I need to know good, trustworthy roofers. Today, I'm joined by one of those people. When I first met with Vadim, who's with Veteran Roofing, we talked for over 2 hours and discovered a mutual passion for education. So today, Vadim is here to educate us about a timely issue that most are not aware of. What happens if you don't replace even a mildly hail-damaged roof before winter sets in? So welcome, Vadim, and why don't you start with when a roof is damaged enough to warrant replacement?
Hey Jackie, thanks for having me. So it's a very, very difficult question to answer because hail damage, unfortunately, is one of those things that uh, you can't actually see when it's bad enough to start leaking. Now, I mean, there are obvious signs, right? Like if your roof got hit with baseball-sized hail, like you're going to
Right.
see the major damage. But when it's just spots, in some cases, it almost looks like discoloration. And the issue that occurs is that you end up with these microfractures in the shingle. And water, when it sits there, it will start seeping through those microfractures. Water is one of those things that if it can find a way, it will find a way. And as it starts leaking underneath the shingles, it will find different areas that it can go to and potentially cause damage to the decking, which is the wood that the roofing materials actually sit on, or it will, potentially run down the inside of a wall and start causing mold and all sorts of other things. So it's it's very challenging to say specifically when you have to replace it. That is also the reason that insurance companies, when they see that there are enough hail hits and there was a hailstorm with large enough sized hail, they will replace the roof even if there is no leak. Because once your roof starts leaking, that's when you really start having issues and the cost skyrockets. I mean, I'm not talking about a few $100s more for repairs. It can be tens of thousands of dollars if your exterior walls are damaged, if your ceilings are damaged, if the decking is damaged, all of those things. So, and that's why it's so important to kind of have it checked out and to, if you do have enough damage, to at least file the claim. And the reason that I say that is because you have to look at it from the insurance company's perspective. If you had a minor hailstorm, what we run into are people who will often say, oh, well, it's not that bad. The hailstorm wasn't too terrible. I don't want to spend the money for my deductible in filing a claim. And what I wanted to really address with you when you asked me about this, I really wanted to jump on this opportunity because it's very challenging when you're standing in front of someone and you're talking about them giving you money. It's very challenging
Right.
sometimes to be impartial and for them to really see that, hey, this guy's just trying to educate me and looking out for my best interest. And so there are a couple of things that happen. And rather than kind of jumping back and forth, I'll kind of walk you maybe through the process if that's
Sure.
easier.
Yeah, sounds
Um,
good.
so, whenever a hailstorm happens and we're talking to somebody who calls us out for an inspection, if we find the damage, we typically see a few concerns. And the concerns are, hey, I don't want to repair my roof because I don't want my insurance policy, my insurance to go up. And that's one of the most common objections, if you will, that I overcome. And the first thing that I always tell people is if the hailstorm was big enough, right? Like if it was an actual major hailstorm, your insurance companies are going to raise the rates for your zip code, whether
Gotcha.
you file a claim or not.
Right.
So, you know, you can get a roof and your rates will go up, or you can not get a roof, but your rates will still go up.
Right.
And so it's one of those things that I'm like, hey, think about it from that perspective. So, because if they just declare your zip code kind of a catastrophe zone, that's what's going to happen no matter what. So that's the first thing I wanted to address. The second thing I want to address is the actual hail damage, which is that people go, oh, it doesn't look that bad. My roof isn't leaking, therefore I don't need to replace it. And this is kind of more along the lines of what you asked. So what ends up happening is when a hailstone, which is a piece of ice, hits your roof at terminal velocity, it ends up doing two things. One is it damages the shingle, so there will be a little, very, very slight indentation of it. And that could have a microfracture underneath the hit where the hailstone hit, which is where your water will get through. The other thing that it does is that it knocks off those little granules off of your roof from wherever it hit. So wherever that impact point is, now you have fewer granules. Those granules help your roof shed water. And in case of snow in the wintertime, it keeps the snow moving along. If it can sit in that indentation because there are granules missing, then guess what happens? That water has plenty more time to seep through that microfracture and then end up underneath the shingles. And the shingles, they're not necessarily what waterproofs your roof, right? You have a felt underneath that's actually your waterproofing membrane. So the shingles are kind of like a shield. And if water gets under that and then freezes, what happens when water freezes?
It expands.
It expands. So if the water expands and it starts moving your shingles apart, and they end up getting a gap underneath them, then when you have a windstorm come through or something else happens, you end up having entire strips of shingles blown off. So this is why it's so important to kind of have it checked out. If you have enough damage, file the claim. Um, it's not just because it's like, hey, new roof. Like, it's because sometimes you might go a few years after a hailstorm and not have any damage that is noticeable to you. But in the meantime, it is like that water is continuously undermining the integrity of your roof. And once it starts happening, you also, I'm going to jump back to the insurance real quick. You have a time limit with most insurance companies. And so if all of a sudden it starts leaking and or you start noticing some kind of damage, and the insurance company comes through and they go, well, the hailstorm was 3 years ago. Now you're on the hook to replace your whole roof as opposed to just paying your deductible. So, those are kind of all the things that I feel it's very important for people to realize, but most people don't because no one takes the time to kind of explain it to them. And when they do, it sounds like a sales pitch. It's like, oh, you just want me to buy a new roof. It's like, well, no, like these are real problems that you need to look at.
Yes. Like you're going to be replacing the roof no matter what at some
Right.
point. So do you want to do it with someone else covering the majority of it, or do you want to have to cover all of it in a few years with all of the additional damage?
Right.
So it's the short term versus long term.
Yes.
So,
For
so
sure.
so when a person is at home and we get a hailstorm, at what point, like at what size of hail would you say I absolutely need to call Vadim to come out and check my roof?
So that depends on several factors. Age of your roof is a big factor. The other thing is now, if you have a fairly new roof, let's say you got it replaced 5, 6, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, that's still relatively newish. Even at 10 years, roofs are designed to, I mean, provided the materials used were decent.
Right, right. It was
They're,
done correctly, and yes.
yeah. So I would say anything over an inch, maybe an inch and a quarter, that's typically kind of your threshold. Uh, I would say anything over an inch, get it checked out.
Okay.
Is it possible that, maybe you have a roof that's like a class 4 hail resistant shingle that resists up to an inch? Sure. But you have to remember that even the quote unquote hail resistant shingles, you've got an something that's an inch and a quarter in diameter coming at your roof at terminal velocity, there is a limit. That's why they're called hail resistant, not hail proof shingles. You know,
Exactly.
um, so get it checked out. And um, worst case scenario, you end up having to replace a roof. Um, best case scenario, they might say, "Hey, we saw a few hits, but it's not enough for the insurance company to cover." Right? Because insurance companies, like if you've got one or two hail hits, they're not going to replace your roof. They do have certain requirements, and so depending on your company, you want to. Some of them will say, well, there's got to be at least 10 hail hits per side of the roof, or there might be some that say, hey, we're just looking for 5 or 6. um, Depending on how bad those hail hits are, is sometimes kind of makes a difference. So definitely get it checked out. Anything over an inch, I would say, have it checked out, because it doesn't cost you anything, right?
Right.
Like any roofer worth their salt, they're going to come out there and they'd be happy to check out your roof, because hey, it's an opportunity for them to make money. So just make sure you find a reliable one. Don't, we call them in the industry, we refer to them as chuck in a truck, right? Like, don't call those guys.
Right.
But if you find a decent roofer that has a decent rating on BBB and decent Google reviews and all of that other stuff, call one of those guys, have them check it out.
Yeah, exactly. So awesome. I think that was really beneficial. I think that covers the topic pretty well. And hopefully people have learned something new about the real problems of hail damage. Because I think
Right.
most people are just thinking about the big stuff and not the long-term challenges. So we all know, obviously, if you get the big softball sized hail like we have had in years past and it punches a hole through your roof,
Right.
obviously there's a problem. So, but I think also people have been burned so many times, even if it's not them directly, they've just heard stories of the
Yeah.
person that just pulls, they're walking door to door and they're just knocking, and then, they start just saying stuff and they run away with your insurance money and never finish the job. So it's
Or they
important
do
to be
finish the
careful.
job that doesn't pass inspection, or they
Right,
don't get
right,
the upgrades, right? Like there are, I mean, as a roofer, I hear all of the, crazy, stories, and I read about them because they pop up on my news feed.
right,
And it's truly incredible. I did not think, I figured, hey, it's like back when I started in roofing, I was like, there's no way that these scams still work, because everybody would know about this. But there are roofers that come in from out of state and will literally take people's money and run. There are companies who open up shop, and they only expect to be there for the season because it was big
right.
enough. And they'll go through and say, yeah, you got to give me your first whatever your insurance company sent you for me to start and order the materials. Well, sure, that's great, but then guess what? They take off with your money, you never get your materials. Or maybe they'll schedule you to be built in November, and then or October, and then they run off to Florida for a few months because it got hit with a hurricane or something, and
Mm,
there's more money there.
right. So
And now
definitely
your
stick with,
roof is leaking
yeah, and
while
stick with
they're
the
roofing it for you.
locals. We have so many good quality roofing companies in Colorado. Like, it's
Mhm.
worth spending and just 5 minutes, even like Google the company, make sure that they exist, and people can always go on to places like Nextdoor. There's a lot of like Facebook neighborhood, like city groups and things like that too,
Mhm.
if they're not sure, or if they don't want to just ask, has anyone even used this company? And also, I would encourage people, if you've run into any of those really bad contractors, like maybe it's worth calling them out sometimes. you know,
It's absolutely worth calling them out.
especially the ones that are like money and run, you know, but
Yeah, yeah,
if obviously, you know, any contractor can make mistakes, right? Try to resolve those individually as people to people and stuff. But when you're not, when things are clearly going really badly, things are not being addressed, not being fixed, it's
right,
clearly becoming a scam. Like, let other
right.
people know so that if they go on to Nextdoor and they search that company's name, it pops up with, I had a really bad experience with them, so that, you know, we could try to get these not good companies to stop doing this stuff, because if there's no victims, they can't continue.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of these guys have been playing this game for so long that they
Yeah,
just changed the name, right?
this is
It's
true.
today
Yes.
it's ABC Roofing, tomorrow it's BCD Roofing, then it's 123, then it's XYZ, right? Like
Yep.
it's unfortunately some of these people spend so much time trying to figure out how to scam people that they, you know, they could probably do just as well if they actually did the work, and they
Right.
would probably make just as much money. But you know, it's funny. So I will say a couple of funny things, because like this has literally happened to my company, where, and this is a piece of advice that I think your viewers should would hopefully benefit from. Um, the money you get from your insurance that for your roof, like that's what it's for. We've had numerous people who would, you know, give us their first check. We would build their roof, and then we would send them the bill for the, you know, remainder of the payment. And we know that the insurance mailed them the check because we can actually check that and verify it. And they spend the money. They spend the money on something else, and then, you know, they get mad because,
Right.
you know, you take them to collections, or, you know, you're calling them going, hey dude, you know, you do have to pay me, like we did do the work. So it's my one piece of advice to your listeners on how to be a good customer, to get good services. Like, don't spend the remainder of
Yeah.
your check on something else. Like, actually use it towards your roof as it's meant to be. Those are, I think that's important to know. I also
Yeah.
think it's important to say that, you know, and Google reviews consequently are, I'm very leery of those. I'm very careful with when I read Google reviews, right? Because you do get, like, I know we've fought numerous people on that, where like they would do something like that, they would spend their money, or they would literally sit there and harass our crews.
Mm.
And then, you know, they'd be like, well, this isn't getting done the way I want it to be. And it's like, look, we're going to do it right. Like, it's going to pass inspection.
Yes.
It's not just, you don't have to take our word for the fact that it got done right. Um, you know, but so there are bad customers out there. And that's why I always say, actually read the reviews. Don't just look at the number of stars or whatever. Now, I mean, if they got 1 or 2 stars, yeah, don't even waste your time. But like, if you
Yes.
got a company
Yes.
with, you know, 4.5 star. Also, the flip side of that is look for the reviews that are unrealistic, right? There are lots of companies who go out there and they, you know, they launch their next scam company, and they get 25 different Gmail addresses, and they write 25 5-star reviews for themselves. And so again, if you're looking as the stars, a lot of times that can be misleading. Read the reviews, see if you can look up any kind of evidence for what they did. Because look, the roof on your home is the single most expensive portion of your house, right next to obviously the structure or whatever, but that's multiple things. So if you're going to have someone take care of it, take a look at kind of who those people are. Do they stand behind their work? Do they offer an actual warranty? And we'll get into it another time, but I definitely um, want to tell people to understand roofing warranties. They are not, a lot of roofing manufacturers say lifetime warranty. It's not.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that 50 years from now they're just going to show up and give you a brand new roof for free, because they have a lifetime warranty. You have to read those details. So there are a lot of little things that, I would be very happy to join you for in the future, and give people kind of some advice on what to look for, and how to avoid potentially very costly and very frustrating problems.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. It's such a big world really out there. So um, being able to look at this, especially when we're not in the midst of the crisis, right? It's not immediately following a hailstorm. We haven't had big storms this year or even for a couple of years now. So it's a good time for people to think this through, process it, and now we're prepared because we're probably overdue for a bad hail year coming next year, right? So, or who knows, it's 2020. We could get a weird winter hailstorm because anything is possible this year. So,
I think
who
there was a
knows?
pretty bad one in September, I think, of 2017 or something like that. There was a pretty
Yeah,
major one. But it's like anything else, right? I mean, be prepared, do your research,
yes,
find the company, um, you know, ask for some references, referrals, like kind of figure it out. When you are, people forget that when there's a hailstorm, it's chaos. And you know, somebody walks up to your door and what they say sounds good,
right,
people sign that contract. And a lot of these roofers, um, almost every roofing company out there has door knockers, right? But a lot of them, that's all they are. Like they don't actually know anything about roofing. Their job is just to get you to sign the contract. And these guys will, bully people into it, and they'll push people into it, and they're very good at what they do. They're trained. They've had decades of experience. So my whole thing is like, don't be subject to that. Don't put yourself in a position where you're freaking out and you don't know what to do, because all these guys are walking around. They're like, hey, John next door just signed, and Sammy two doors down just signed with me. You need to sign with me too, because we're going to be here. Da, da, da. Like, don't buy any of that stuff.
yeah,
Do your research. Find a company that you're comfortable with. Find a company that's going to be there for you, in the event something goes wrong. It is construction. Things happen. There are delays, whatever. Find a company that's going to do right by you. And when something happens, instead of waiting for someone to knock on your door, um, just call them up, and then you can say, hey, man, it's good. I've got a roofer, you know, they've got me handled, and just be done with it. So, I
yeah. And
mean,
I'd say for anyone that's watching this, if nothing else, now you've learned a little bit from Vadim. You can always reach out to me. I know other roofers as well. So like if Vadim's too busy, I can reach out to some others that I know are not going to be doing anything shady, that your roof will actually pass inspection. It'll get done. Like, the goal is to make sure that your house is protected. So, just never sign a contract on your doorstep. Just don't. Take a breath. Unless your house is on fire, it can wait. Like, and if the house is on fire, you're calling the fire department. So any emergency in your house, almost without question, is it that pressing of an emergency that you can wait and you can call a trustworthy roofer. You do not need to be talking to someone on the doorstep. And if you like them, that's fine, but do the research. Still don't sign.
yeah, yeah, at least figure it out, and research their company. There are lots of good roofing companies, right? Like, I mean, even as a roofer, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, they're a competitor of mine, therefore they must be terrible. Like, no, there are some great
Exactly.
roofing companies out there. I don't ever bash my competition. There are fine lines in terms of differences, like maybe what materials they prefer to use, or little things like that. But here's what I will tell you: if a roofer ever tells you that they're going to beat anybody's price or everybody's price, run. Nobody works for free. You don't go to work And, you know, when your manager says, hey, man, I can hire someone else for 50 cents an hour less, you're like, well, don't worry, I'll do it for 75 cents an hour less, right? Like, no one worth their salt, so to speak,
Yeah.
is going to do that. And so, and roofers, even those guys, right, who are willing to beat anybody's price, they're all going to make money. Nobody's going to work for you for free. So you're either going to you're going to sacrifice something. And any decent roofer, they're all going to be within the same ballpark.
Right.
It's just who you're comfortable working with, who you trust, you know, who you feel will actually have your best interests in mind, as opposed to just their profit margin. You know, that's really what it is.
Yeah, and I'd say that that's actually the common element between, you know, you and a couple other like handful of roofers that I work with more consistently is we all have just everyone's interest in mind. We want a win-win. We don't want this to be a short-term win for us and a loss for someone else. So I think it's that to me that goes a long way towards trusting someone.
Look, I personally don't door knock, right? Like, we've
Right.
got guys in the company who will come through, and during, I mean, obviously a big hailstorm or whatever, they'll go out and try to reach those people who don't have a roofer. I don't door knock. I work purely off of referrals, right? So if I don't get introduced to you by somebody, or if you don't call me because you know, met me somehow, or I was recommended to you, um, you won't talk to me. And
Right.
so one of the, you know, one of the biggest things that, and the reason I do that is because I'm like, I'm not here to sell you on a roof. If you need a roof, you need a roof. I'll tell you need it. If you don't, I'll tell you you don't. Like, it's really easy for me. But the thing about it is, when you talk about the long term or everybody wins, if you have a great experience with me because we got you the roof color that you wanted and the materials that you wanted, and, you know, the price was reasonable, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we did it in a timely fashion, we took care of all the negotiations with your insurance, as opposed to you having to deal with all that. Guess what you're going to do? You're going to call your friends,
Yep.
and you're going to call your family, and you're going to be like, hey, here's Vadim's phone number, call him directly, he'll take good care of you, right? Because and that might get me, like, I've literally had individuals who I've taken care of, and they've sent me 8 times the amount of business that I made on their roof. So could I have potentially, like, sold them stuff they don't need, or upgraded them to whatever premium stuff that they didn't need, and made an extra few $100? Yeah, I could have, but what's the point?
Yeah.
Right. I now literally made 8 times what I made off of their one roof, you know, because they've sent me so much business. So that's really what why I don't understand why there are roofers who just try to kind of like get one over on people. I'm like, people will send you referrals. Like, they understand how the business works. People aren't dumb. Like, they
Yep.
get it. And if they have a good experience with you, you create that experience for them, people will take care of you, and they'll take care of you for years to come, because they don't forget, right? Like, you might get your roof done, and 2 or 3 years later, you hear about somebody else going, oh my God, my roof just got blasted. Hey man, I know a roofer. Even though you haven't talked to me in a year, like, or
Yeah,
two,
exactly.
you still have my number in your phone. Like, that stuff doesn't go away. So no, for sure. I'm a huge proponent of that. I think referrals are pivotal. And if you do know a good business that takes care of you, definitely refer them out. Take the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. That was so much useful information, Vadim. I hope that everyone watching this found the information helpful. I'd be surprised if anyone watching it knew everything that you mentioned. For anyone watching, if you'd like more information, you need a free roofer inspection. Maybe you've realized that you really should have gotten it inspected, or you just have general questions about roofing, exteriors, insurance claims, all of those fun, not fun things. I'll include Vadim's contact information with this video. And Of course, if you have any questions about solar for your home, business, cabin, or camper, I'm also available to answer any of those questions. And Vadim and I actually work together. So anytime when he's got an insurance claim and the solar, like a house already has solar and it needs to come off, then we work together. My guys come out and remove the solar so they can take care of the roof and we get it put back on. All of that is handled seamlessly through the insurance. So if you have questions as well about that, occasionally that comes up outside of insurance situations as well. So all of our contact information will be there.
Quick
I
note on that.
Yeah,
Um, it is, and because I think coming from me as a roofer, it might ring a little bit differently for people. It really matters who you use to remove and reinstall solar panels. And it can be horrible on the roofing process if you have a company that doesn't do a good job. If they're not careful, they will damage your newly installed roof. Um, it can take months and months. I've literally heard people not being able to get a new roof because the solar company couldn't come out for 6 months to remove it. So I do want to say, like, there is a reason I work with Jackie and her crews. Um, and so it's be mindful of that as well. Is
yes,
important
yes,
process.
yes. It definitely is important. I'm not sure how crews honestly damage an asphalt shingle roof, but clearly it has happened and people find ways to do it. So you always want to use quality contractors with anything that you're doing. I will have
Yeah.
many more conversations coming up, including revisiting some with the dean. I am not scheduling them, and that's on purpose because contractors, we all get busy at different times. So
Yep.
if you'd like to catch future videos, be sure to like the Galusha Solar Colorado Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, join our mailing list because I'll update people when those are available. So basically, whatever is your preferred way of keeping up with this type of information. And that way you'll be able to catch all of the valuable tips to protect and sustain your home. So have a great day. And thanks again for joining us, Vadim.
Thanks for having me, Jackie. Take care.